85.15 brass up 4.59%, copper up 2.71%, aluminum up 2.52%, and steel staying completely flat. Here's what moved the market this week. We have more green than red this week. Happy Friday. Carol here from Scrap Monster with your weekly scrap metal price report for September 26th through October 3rd, 2025. I'll break down each category, explain market drivers, and even share money-making tips for scrappers. Remember, all figures are North America broker buying rates per our Scrap Monster price index, and this report covers North America only. Now, let's get into the details. Let's start off with copper. Copper scrap made gains across the board, the week's second biggest mover. Number 3, light copper closed the week up from $4.42 to $4.54 per pound, a 2.71% rise. That's real money when you're talking tonnage. Number 2, wire and tubing wasn't far behind at 2.65%. Up from $4.52, closing at $4.64. Number 1, copper wire and tubing ticked up about 2.6% week on week. The driver here, COMEX futures hit $4.89, up nearly 7 cents on supply constraints and infrastructure spending. If you're holding quality copper right now, this uptrend looks solid. These moves are a healthy rebound in copper scrap prices. By contrast, just a week ago, copper prices had been basically flat, so this jump is notable. On the ground, scrapyards reported stronger demand for copper wire and tubing as U.S. manufacturing gears up. The upward shift in copper also reflects global pressures. U.S. export tariffs on copper, 50% on imported refined and scrap, are seen as severe headwind for overseas sellers, even as domestic demand tries to absorb output. Across U.S. regions, the picture is similar. All regions saw copper increase. For example, on the East Coast, number 3 light copper led gains with about 2.7%, and Midwest and West also showed 2.6 to 2.7% moves in key wire and tubing grades. In plain terms, most copper scrap is trading a few pennies higher per pound than last week. This adds up. For every 1,000 pounds of number 1 wire and tubing you sell, you're making about $8 to $12 more than a week ago. Now brass, this week's champion. Brass scrap had the strongest rise of any metal this week. The standout, 85.15 brass, absolutely exploded, jumping from $3.27 to $3.42 per pound, up 4.6%. That's a 15-cent jump in 1 week. Brass radiators and rod borings both gained 1.81%. Other brass and bronze grades, red brass, yellow brass, 80-20, 70-30, brass radiator cores, etc., also moved up modestly, typically 1 to 2%. Only brass radiators and radiator ends were flat. In short, brass and bronze is a broadly uptrending market now. This may be surprising for some scrappers since brass trends to track copper closely, and copper was only up about 2.7%. But more copper content in brass and strong alloy demand are pushing brass even higher. One scrap market watcher notes that collecting and bundling clean yellow or red brass can yield big profits this week. For example, on the West Coast, 85.15 brass closed at around $3.45, up 4.6% from $3.30, virtually the same 4.6% gain. That kind of jump means if you hold a lot of brass, today's price is about 15 to 20 cents higher per pound than a week ago. If you're sorting brass, focus on that 85.15 grade. The premium gap is widening. Aluminum showed consistent strength across the board. The biggest increases were EC aluminum wire up 2.52% and mixed aluminum turnings up 2.08%. For example, EC wire went from $1.19 to $1.22 per pound over the week, reflecting that 2.5% gain. Mixed aluminum turnings similarly climbed about 2.1%. Other aluminum categories, radiators, cast scrap, alloy wheels, sheet, etc., were mostly flat on the week. No big drops or gains. What's driving this? 50% aluminum tariffs are forcing domestic recycling demand higher. In practical terms, aluminum prices are up a few pennies in those top grades. A more technical reason, U.S. processors have eased supply constraints, and China's new industrial policy is propping up metals demand. Plus, a weaker U.S. dollar that tends to push commodity prices up has provided some support, but overall, this market is only modestly higher. Many dealers say aluminum scrap is still below spring highs. Most yards are seeing better prices on clean aluminum grades. Steel scrap tells a different story. All common ferrous scrap grades held steady. For example, number 1 bundle, number 1 busheling, number 1 HMS, HMS 8020, shredded auto scrap structural steel, all closed unchanged at roughly $265 to $420 per metric ton on our index. Number 1 HMS stayed at $320 per metric ton, shredded auto at $370, HMS 8020 at $265, number 1 busheling at $400 per metric ton. Why? To readers, that means domestic steel scrap is dead flat. There were mild positive signals overseas. For example, US scrap PPI ticked up 0.6% month over month, but US mills saw slow order books. Industry reports even flagged upcoming mill maintenance that could limit steel production into October. In short, no new steel price triggers this week. Scrap steel markets are quiet and unchanged. Stainless steel scrap was flat this week. Prices for 304 stainless steel solids stayed at 61 cents per pound across the country. There was no change in 310 or 430 grades either. Processor contacts say stainless demand is stable but not strong enough to push prices higher yet. At least scrapyards can buy or sell stainless without any discounts or premium change this week. Lead scrap, including wheel weight, solid lead, range lead, and auto batteries, was unchanged week on week. Scrap auto batteries stayed about 24 cents per pound nationwide and about 50 cents for solid lead in most markets, exactly the same as before. That's not surprising as gasoline prices are stable and battery demand flat. Zinc scrap prices saw a slight uptick. New zinc diecast and old zinc diecast showed modest gains, about 1.3 to 1.5%, but nothing dramatic. New zinc diecast went from 79 cents to 80 cents per pound, a 1.27% rise. Old zinc diecast went up 1.52%, about a penny higher per pound. So if you have pounds of zinc diecast, expect to get a penny or two more per pound than last week. The big picture, we're seeing a clear split. Non-ferrous metals are climbing on supply issues and infrastructure demand, while ferrous stays weak on mill outages and soft demand. Copper hitting nearly $5 per pound is pulling the whole non-ferrous complex higher. Recent 50% tariffs on aluminum and copper imports are a headwind for exports and scrap trading. Many U.S. copper and aluminum processors worry these duties make American scrap less competitive abroad. Our analysts note that exporters in Asia already cite these U.S. tariffs as a severe headwind. On the upside, China's industry ministry, MIIT, is rolling out plans to support non-ferrous metals growth. Any boost in Chinese manufacturer or construction lifts scrap usage, especially copper and aluminum. We're watching for how this might help prices. Europe's scrap market is also reacting to policy talk. For example, EU is considering new export levies. All told, global trade policies are key drivers right now, with US moves and Chinese demand setting the tone for scrap flows. For live pricing and professional tools, head to Scrap Monster right now. Quick recap. Brass led at 4.59%, copper gained 2.71%, aluminum up 2.52%, while steel and stainless stayed completely flat. Non-ferrous wins this week. Sort and upgrade your aluminum turnings. Mixed aluminum turnings saw one of the week's biggest jumps, 2.08%. That means mills and brokers are willing to pay a bit more for clean sorted turnings. If you collect aluminum swarf turnings, consider running them through a fine screen or magnetic separator to remove steel and resin. Cleaner turnings commands higher prices. Use this uptrend to negotiate a better rate. In practice, even a few percentage points of purity can add $1 or $2 per bale, so separating your aluminum turnings into a cleaner batch can boost your margin given the current market. Remember, these are North America prices only. For Europe, China, and India pricing, check the full report on scrapmonster.com. That wraps up our market breakdown. Thank you for watching. For the full report and professional pricing tools, visit scrapmonster.com, trusted by over 100,000 industry professionals. If you found this update helpful, please subscribe to our YouTube channel for weekly reports. Remember, all quoted scrap prices are broker buying rates only. Until next week, I'm Carol with Scrap Monster. Stay safe and keep those scrapyards turning. Bye-bye.